Thank you, Bob, for that very comprehensive survey of the cases and up-to-date survey. The last case you mentioned was interesting because in one of the geographic areas I practice, Palm Beach, we deal with that through view easements, and they are much valued and much litigated. But absent having that established right, it's very difficult to obtain the right to have a view if it's not directly behind your property. Our next topic, along the lines of my introductory remarks, deals with the area of new finance regulations as a result of the real estate financing debacle, banking, CMBS debacles we've seen, and many other new federal regulations and policies affecting you as a real estate practitioner. We're very pleased to have with us today Shari Olefson, who is director of the Carnegie Group and a shareholder at the Tampa-based law and lobbying firm of Fowler White Boggs. Shari is board certified in real estate, and I'm pleased to say a former student. I'm proud to say a former student, having the Master of Laws of the Real Property Development Program of the University of Miami School of Law. But it doesn't stop there. Shari has been a leader in representing banks in regulatory and compliance matters involving OCC enforcement orders, as well as FDIC takeovers, loss share agreements, and many other challenges facing institutions. She's also been instrumental in helping homeowners navigate financial, economic, and housing challenges for several years. Shari is also an experienced journalist. Having written for and been quoted by numerous media outlets, having been published and quoted in the, among others, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, USA Today, The Herald, and CNBC, and other media outlets. And more recently, as an author, Shari has published Foreclosure Nation, Mortgaging the American Dream, and as I understand, is working on her sequel to that book. I'm pleased and privileged to present Shari Olefson.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction. I'd love to have my mom here to hear that sometimes, because we all know what mothers can do to us. So that would be nice. I'm going to actually tape that and play that back when she starts giving me a hard time. And thank you for including me. I mean, this is a wonderful institute. The Biltmore, I think everyone will agree, is a wonderful venue. I was talking to Harlan before, and he mentioned that he'd been coming to the institute all the way from Sarasota pretty much since the beginning, which is really sort of a testament to what you've done with the institute itself. Out of curiosity, how many people here are touched by University of Miami, either graduates or current students there? A lot. Good, good. Well, one of the things, can I ask you a question? Do you know where the clicker is for the slides?
We'll get that for you.
Okay. One of the things that struck me when this crisis first began, and it was still a subprime crisis, I kept thinking, geez, you know, all we need are some really good lawyers from South Florida, which is where a big part of the problem was, to give those guys in Washington a little bit of an idea in terms of how they can solve the problems. And I really do believe that if they had asked you all for some input in solving what was a subprime crisis, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation today. That's it? Okay. I have some pictures for you guys, just because when I'm in the audience, I love to look at things too. Since then, of course, this whole crisis has really taken on a life of its own. Let's see if this works now. Is this the button, the forward button? We could do it. Oh, there we go. Okay, look at that. Since the crisis started, obviously, it's taken on a life of its own. It's in the headlines all the time. The whole blame game is going around. We've got the media and politicians and, of course, an entire industry of careers that have been built on the foreclosure crisis now. So in addition to it being a much bigger problem, there are a lot of people invested. And it's, as we know, because it's a big problem and so many people are invested, it's definitely not going to go away for a long time. So as real estate practitioners, the federal regulations and policies we're going to talk about today are essential to our practice because it's the bottom line for a lot of business. I was talking to Gail, Gail before, who was a recent law school graduate. Yay for Gail. and she's going into the condominium business. But even the condo aspect here in Florida is hugely touched by foreclosures, and a lot of that business, she was saying, has to do with the bulk buyers of condo units. I'm guessing that most of us are here for the CLE credits. Hopefully you have some interest in the topics too. That would be good. As the speakers, obviously it's an honor to be included in the Institute, but before we really get into the nitty-gritty here, I want to let you know why I'm here so that you can understand my perspective. I'm here because of my kids. That's the only reason, and that's where my passion comes from. How many here have kids? Okay, most everyone, and grandchildren, hopefully, for a lot of people. How many people have teenage daughters, just out of curiosity? Okay, I have two. I have Devin, who is 17, and Brooke, who's 15. So when Bill told me that I'd get to have a night by myself at the Biltmore in a luxurious room, I was like right on board with it, which says a lot because, they say that speaking is like second in terms of fear factors for adults next to showing up naked at work. So for a night at the Biltmore by myself, I was willing to come and speak. But the real reason that I'm here is for my kids, because we have created basically, I think, sort of a little bit of a mess. And for kids who are graduating into the world today, we all spend a lot of effort, our hearts and souls, raising our kids and getting them prepared for the world, and nowadays not to mention our wallets because education is so expensive. This is a photo recently from last week at Occupy Wall Street. The world is not ready for our kids. We can do whatever we want to get them ready today. How many people have kids who are graduating from college now? A few. Not a great time to be graduating from college. So my passion comes from making sure that the federal regulations and policies that we're going to talk about today actually work so that when Devin and Brooke graduate from college, the world will be ready for them too. Right now, you should know there is statistically more opportunity for college graduates in Sweden and Finland and Canada than there is in the United States anymore. And frankly, I think that's something that we should be saddened and maybe a little bit frustrated and embarrassed by. 20% of the jobs were tied somehow to real estate. So real estate and the economy are inextricably combined and tied together. We need to fix real estate before the economy will get better. So bottom line, if we do a good job cleaning this up, hopefully the world will be better for our kids when they step into it. We're way getting ahead now because I'm not very good at the technology. There we go. One of the things when I started writing Foreclosure Nation, and I hope you'll bear in mind when we talk about the perspective for these regulations and policies today, God bless you, is the value shift in this country. Out of curiosity, how many people here knew someone 10 years ago who was in foreclosure or who had been foreclosed? One person. Two people. How many people know someone today who is in foreclosure or has been foreclosed? Most everyone today knows someone, and as we know from psychological studies, the more familiar we are with something, the more it's going to become a part of our culture and value. I use this slide as an example because I have to tell you, for most people, I think 10 years ago, if you saw this slide, you'd be thinking it was like from that scene in Back to the Future where like the whole world is gray and there's crime and gangs on the street and everything, but it's not. Today, we see a slide like this, and our kids are driving by foreclosure signs all the time, and we're not thinking twice about it. So in terms of perspective of what we're going to talk about today, I hope that you all will think and remember what it would have been like to be having these discussions 10 years ago. By show of hands, how many people practice residential? How about commercial? Okay, most of what we talk about today is going to have to do with housing because that's really where the crisis is, but we'll try to bring some commercial stuff into it too. And we're going to talk in broad strokes about the regulations and the policies and really what it means to you all. There's a handout which you should have with a spreadsheet with all the legislation and the nitty-gritty, and you'll see if you take a quick look at that why we're not going to talk about every single one of those things today because we'd be here for a really long time. In terms of the foreclosure initiatives on the federal level, there have been two buckets, as you can see. The first bucket we're going to talk about, we kind of call the triage buckets. And that is really meant, well, this is like watching a tennis match going like this. That's real, the triage initiatives were meant to stop the bleeding. They're more short-term, and you'll be familiar with some of those. They're aimed at helping people stay in their homes, keep their heads above water, and keeping the systems moving, like the foreclosure systems, the court systems, and the financing systems. The second budget the second bucket are what we call reform initiatives. And those are more longer term, more permanent type initiatives. And we'll talk in a little bit about how most of those are still in flux, but those are aimed at fixing the big systemic problems that cause the defaults and also punishing the bad guys, as you'll see. In terms of the first bucket, the triage initiatives, we've got sort of three flavors of those. The first are the groups of initiatives aimed at directly helping the homeowners. The second are community preservation initiatives, and then the third are the GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and leveraging them to solve the problems. Under the first group, which is the ones that affect most homeowners, how many of you all do short sales or modifications or refinances? Okay, so you're familiar with this. Is everyone familiar with Making Home Affordable? You can raise your hand. That was the government's program? Okay. We've had a lot of changes. Actually, we had a big change this week under Making Home Affordable. The first program under Making a Home Affordable has been the HAMP modification program. And I think most people have been, does anyone know who applied for anyone who applied for a modification under HAMP? One person. Did the person get it who applied? Okay. There have been a lot of people who applied. I mean, the government announced this program a couple years ago. It was only meant for a narrow group of people. Everyone got online because why not? If you could get your mortgage modified, why not? But instead of getting modifications, what most people got under the Home Affordable Modification Program was a really bad experience with their banks. So what we ended up getting instead is a lot of people around the country saying, you know, I tried to work with the bank, I tried to get a modification, they screwed it up, they jerked me around, so screw the bank. Does that sound familiar? Has anyone ever heard anyone say that? Yeah, that's kind of where we've come to with the HAMP modifications. Really a Kafka-esque type experience. In terms of the actual outcome, we had a little bit under 2 million actual trial modifications, under 1 million actual modifications that were permanent, and only about 600,000 or 700,000 modifications under that particular program that actually worked. Here are the numbers for Miami, Fort Lauderdale area so you can see. So in terms of the cost, I think we can agree that the HAMP modification program didn't work too well. The other part of Making Home Affordable was the Home Affordable Refinance Program. The acronym is HARP, H-A-R-P. Has anyone heard about the changes to HARP this week? A lot of people have heard? Okay. Basically, the biggest challenge that we had with the HARP initiative has been the fact that people are so far underwater, and you couldn't even qualify for this if you were more than 125% underwater. So, of course, in the hardest hit states, that was just not an option. The big challenge we had was 45% of the homeowners here in Florida with mortgages are underwater. That's huge. That represents people who may reasonably walk away from their homes because it would be a good financial move for them to do that. Of those, 75% are paying interest rates that are in the 5 to 7% rate. So they're actually paying over the market rate. It's estimated that about 19 million Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac borrowers are in that situation. So one of the things that the government had been trying to do was to sort of fix this and make that program work a little bit better for people. In terms of perspective, does anyone remember when Hillary Clinton was running for president and one of her, part of her platform was that we should immediately adjust interest rates or freeze the interest rate adjustments on adjustable subprime mortgages? Does anyone remember that? That was a big issue. And I remember myself hearing that, and this is just in terms of where our heads were at 3 years ago, 4 years ago, thinking, oh my God, how could you do that? That's a private contract. You can't do that. Well, as it turns out, that's been one of the platforms, one of the things that have worked with these programs because I think 99% of the modifications actually involve freezing those rates. The other obstacles to refinances, though, have been the negative equity, bad credit, the costs. And remember, those costs were just, those LLPAs were just started a couple years ago to recover